Hyperdrive Hockey is brought to you by the Game Over Network. Make sure to follow us on YouTube at Game Over Network and catch Hyperdrive Hockey in audio format on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other good streaming platform. Hello, beautiful citizen of the frozen pond. Welcome to another episode of Hyperdrive Hockey on the Game Over Network. A lot to talk about today on Hockey Planet. Of course, Connor McJesus taking second place in Edmonton Oilers history for point leaders. And you know what? I was looking at this morning, and if Connor, and I'm pretty sure he will, extend next summer, unless disaster strikes, he will at one point beat the great one, not for points all time, but for points all time for the Edmonton Oilers. So that's an actually interesting fact regarding Connor McDavid. We are at the halfway point of the season. We are actually a little bit past halfway point of the season for everybody except the LA Kings, who are sitting at the halfway point of their season. Of course, the Kings having games delayed because of what is happening in LA. And of course, if you are listening to us from LA or wherever in California, well, we're thinking of you, and of course thinking of the firefighters risking their lives and working very hard, and everybody working very hard in this tough time in the City of Angels. Just before moving forward with our subjects today, we are very excited to tell you about our new partner at Hyperdrive Hockey, a delightfully witchy gut and glam jewelry store, making handcrafted art that varies from subtle silver and gold pieces to glamorous bespoke pieces. Inshu is more than just a company. They have built a community through their advocacy and welcoming attitude that has made them an institute in Montreal. Located in historic Château Saint-Ambroise, Inshu Bijou, that's a beautiful name, Inshu Bijou also runs seasonal themed market called Maleficarum Market, where artisans from all over get together to showcase and sell their wares. Drop by 4000 Rue Saint-Ambroise, suite 278, and say hi to Astrid and the Wicked team, or head to their website, inshubijou.com. That's INCHOOBIJOUX.com, and enhance your style. You know what? That's actually pretty funny because I've been playing the Harry Potter Hogwarts Legacy game recently. My girlfriend and I got ourselves a PS5 for Christmas, gift from us to us. And so when I'm reading Delightfully Witchy Gut and Glam, yeah, that's pretty much my character in Harry Potter. Kevin Laramie, how are you doing, my man?
I'm doing pretty good. Good to be with you today, Max. And, you know, we talked about McDavid, McJesus yesterday. 2 goals and an assist, second all-time behind Wayne Gretzky with the Oilers. You mentioned that he might get 2,000 points too. That could be very interesting in this era of hockey where, yes, goals seems to be on the uptick. They were down for a long time, and this is one number that sticks in my head. During the Gretzky time period from 80 to 89, if you say the glorious days of the Oilers, and when he moved over to the Kings, 3.84 goals per game were scored in the league. And then in the late 90s, early 2000, all the way to the 2010s, when Ovechkin was scoring a lot, it was 278 or so. And now it's back to over 3.3 or so. So you're seeing an evolution, and it's always cyclical. Goaltenders, well, they were bad back in the day. Yeah. They became good, and then scorers know how to score again now.
Yeah, you know what's interesting is that you are right. It is cyclical. I do wonder if that cyclical nature, though, is a bit on its way out. Why? Because of the nature of today's world, because of the small attention span, because pro sports league now, they're not only playing against each other, they're not only rivals of each other, they're rivals of anything in the entertainment business. And what sells? Offense sells. Offense sells. Every single league is trying to sell through offense. Some people don't like it. I do personally like a little bit more in the middle. You know what? Like when there are 10, 100-point scorer, the goalie in me is like, that's a little high. That is a little high. But I do think that, because, post-lockout of 05-06, well, the 04-05 lockout, so in the 05-06 season, for a few years it went up. That's when Ovi and Sid came in. They both had 100 points as rookies and went down again. Now it's up again. I think it's going to stay up for a while. I'm not saying it's going to stop the cyclical nature, but maybe the cycles will be longer, or at least the league will keep trying to find more offense. And because of that, I do believe that Connor McDavid will reach 2K one day. He will become the second player to reach 2K. Unless Sid plays until he's 50.
Which could happen. He's in shape.
You know what? Yeah, that could happen. That could. Yeah, I'm gonna. You know what? I'm gonna stop here. Maybe Sid could do. I'm not totally ruling this out. That he goes full Tom Brady, plays until his mid-40s. He could. Honestly, he could do it.
So where would the second chapter be? Comes to Montreal Canadiens, help the Canadiens turn the corner. But that's the idea.
Who will be the Buccaneers to Sidney Crosby's twilight of his career?
And then hopefully he stops there and not pull like a Brett Favre and goes to the New York Jets after or Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, let's not go there. Let's not go to the New York Jets. You know what? The story today, we are at the halfway point of this season, and let's do the main story of the first half and what we think will be the main story of the second half. After that, we will bring one big question for the second half of the season for every Canadian team. But first, to me, Kev, the story of this first half is unexpected teams leading the way, both in the East and the West, because you can go ahead and make fun of me right here, right now, in the comment, roast your boy, because the top two teams in the NHL at the halfway point of the season, I had them out of the playoff this year. The Washington Capitals in the East, the Winnipeg Jets in the West, I had both those teams out of the playoffs. The Capitals, I was pretty damn sure of my prediction. The Jets, I reluctantly, because I put the Utah Hockey Club in the playoffs. Who else did I have in the playoffs that right now might not be in it? Nah, I think that was it. That was the big surprise for me, would have been the Utah Hockey Club making the playoffs. Oh, I had Nashville, of course.
Yeah.
I had Nashville out of the playoff. I had the Jets as a fringe playoff teams missing the playoff by a bit. And then Connor Hellebuck came in and went like, yep, no, you shall not pass this year. Nobody, absolutely nobody is getting a puck behind me. In my little rant on Connor Hellebuck in the last episode, Kev, where I said that he was the MVP for me, there's one thing I didn't say that is even more crazy. The guy has as many shutouts as he has regulation loss. He has 6 shutouts, and the Jets have lost 6 games in regulation when Connor Hellebuck is between the pipes. So two big surprises a bit for different reasons. Like I said, the Jets to me are not that big of a surprise because I had them as a fringe playoff teams, and they were really good last year. I just didn't expect them to be this good. But the Capitals, to me, if you saw it coming, kudos to you. I actually liked the addition of Chychrun. I like the addition of Pierre-Luc Dubois despite the contract. I thought those were smarter moves to try and keep the window open through Ovi's twilight of his career than what Pittsburgh were doing. I just didn't think it was enough. And turns out not only is it enough, but Connor McMichael, among many other, finally turning it up in the NHL. And of course, the stellar play of both goalies, Logan Thompson and Charlie Lindgren, as the Capitals right where they are. And at this point of the season, it's no fluke. I do think they will win the Metropolitan. I do think the Washington Capitals are at the top. Maybe not of the full East, but they're at the top of their division this day to me.
Well, they have a leg up on the Devils for sure. 6 points ahead of the Devils and the Metropolitan. And also, I want to say a shout out to Spencer Carberry. Jack Adams, pretty much the front runner at this point in the season to win the best coach of the year.
Yeah.
His second
Dean Evison suddenly is in the discussion too. I thought it was a shoe-in for Spencer, but now you have no choice but to have Dean Evison. But at this point, I agree with you. To me, still front runner.
Yeah, and in his second season with the club, he's bringing a lot of new energy and I wouldn't say new ways to play because you can't reinvent the wheel. It's things of, like, it's 5-on-5 hockey. There's only so much you could do, as Guy Boucher with the 1-3-1 and how that went down back in the day. But there is some sort of a new energy, a new way that he's managing his players that does bring out the best in them. And I think that's probably the proximity of his age with the players. There's some sort of a correlation here where they're able to communicate better, closer in age,
That's a good point.
Closer in generation. You don't have that gap and that feel of authority figure like Tortorella, example, with his players and the old coaches like Lindy Ruff in Buffalo. And so you don't have that, I think, well, formerly in Buffalo. And I think you do have a good, I would say, mix of a good coach, players that are buying in the system, players that are playing above what is expected of them, which means the team is playing better than expected, and goalkeepers that are doing their job.
Yeah, Carberry at 43 years old is actually younger than Ovi. I'm kidding, of course.
It's close, but that's pretty close.
No, but we never know. Those old conspiracy theories that those last players born in the ex-URSS, like Ovi, Kovalchuk, and Radulov. Alexander Radulov is where the theory started, because when he was playing for the Rempart here in Quebec, he looked so much older than a junior player, and he was tearing it up. A lot of people were like, is the man really a kid? Like, isn't he like 25? Like, anyways.
Well, if you look at a Levechkin, there's a lot of white hair there, so he is he does look a little bit like his age too.
You know what? If he had like broke like in his 30s, would have been like, actually maybe. Especially with what you said, he went gray early. A lot of people go gray early. Some people lose their hair early. It's all good. I'm starting to lose my hair. That's why I'm always wearing a cap. But since he didn't break, if he is really 45-year-old man, that is one machine of a 45-year-old man. Anyways, I do think Ovi is the story of the second half of the season to me, Kev, because he is 21 goals away from tying Wayne Gretzky's goal record. He is 22 goals away from beating him. Ovi, if he hadn't been injured, we would be talking about when. It's still a little bit of an if, because he has 20 goals in 28 games this year. Like I said, he needs 22. He has 38 games. The Washington Capitals have 38 games left to their season. So Ovi, if he doesn't get injured again, he has 38 games to do it. I think he will do it. But here's something interesting. I was on the website of the NHL, Kev, this morning. I was on the NHL.com, and there's this tiny little graphic to the right.
Yeah.
The Great Chase, great with an 8, like GR8, and a little ticker, 22 goals to go. Number one, I think it's cool, but you know what this made me think of? You're a producer for Apple TV. You work on MLS Soccer. Remember when Messi came in?
Yeah.
When Messi came in, MLSsoccer.com pretty much became Lionel Messi.
It was MessiLeagueSoccer.com, yes.
Yeah, it was absolutely crazy how everything on the website was Messi. And now, let's be real here. I love Ovi. Ovi, in terms of marketing and international reach and all of that, is no Messi. Let's be freaking real here. It's like comparing Taylor Swift to, I don't know, a big metal band. Like, yeah, maybe you're the biggest metal band in the world, but you're no Taylor Swift. You know what I mean? I'm strictly talking reach here. I'm not comparing the accomplishment on the field or the ice. Strictly in terms of reach. So, of course, the NHL isn't going to go all in on Ovi like the MLS did with Messi, who at some point I kind of felt like they overdid it. That's a discussion for another day.
They did. They overdid it for sure. But
Thank you.
That's fine.
But I am surprised. I am a little bit surprised that it's not even bigger than this little ticker to the right. I mean, come on. We are talking about a record that we thought was never going to be broken, that will be broken. We are talking, you just said it, we are talking about a guy who played in an era where goal scoring was down. We are talking about a guy who has been great, like really like Frosted Flakes, great, for almost 20 years now. It deserves more than a little ticker. I am actually, maybe it will get bigger as we like. Maybe we're trying not to put too much of a spotlight on it right now because he is still 22 goals away. I get that. I do hope, though, without going full on Messi and making but you know what? The league needs to capitalize on this from a marketing perspective. This is the biggest story in North American sport this year from a purely sports, in a sports way, you know?
Yeah,
in an achievement way. This is completely huge. This is bigger than the sport in itself. This is bigger than hockey. Wayne Gretzky's records are some of the most unbeatable in team sports. And Ovi will do it. To me, this is the story of the second half. And I hope that when he gets within 10, it will really take over the narrative. I don't care if anybody in any market, their feeling gets hurt. It needs to be treated like the achievement that it is, which is the biggest accomplishment in hockey, I will say it, in the 21st century.
Well, I can reassure you in a few factors here, Max. It will get bigger. And I can't reveal everything, but I work on hockey TV channels. And
Oh, my man has some insight
there's
here.
some plans that, let's just say, sooner rather than later, you'll see a lot more Capital Washington games on your television in English,
Yeah.
in French, for sure.
At which point do you think? Because there needs to, you can't. I might be contradicting myself here, but from what I just said a second ago, but you can't overdo it in a way like don't start putting the caps
Exactly
on
right now.
primetime television when he's within 10.
No, but when he's
But
in
honestly,
five, like when he's close
and even
to,
maybe 6, it's
Yeah.
Ovi.
Yeah.
The guy could go on a 6-goal in 3-game spree.
exactly.
Like,
And that's why soon Wayne Gretzky's schedule will be just to follow
Yeah.
the Capitals
Exactly.
from game to game. And I also want a little shout out to the NHL's Twitter account that yesterday did a great deep dive into multiple statistics on the Great Chase. They've called it the Great Chase. And there's like 10 tweets back to back explaining in details the differences and what is important from Ovechkin's perspective this year, how he's playing great this year. They put the entire chase in perspective. Also, a great thread that you can find on Twitter and on Threads and on Blue Sky, I believe, from the NHL.com social media accounts, detailing a lot of the statistics that are explaining this great chase.
yeah. To me, that's the story of the second half of the season. The Great Chase. Let us know what you think in the comment. If you have another story, too, that you feel I'm disrespecting here because I'm putting too much emphasis on my man Alex Ovechkin, please do. Just before we move to our Canadian teams and a story to follow for each of them for the second half of the season, Kev, just before we came on air, the NHL has revealed the Stadium Series jerseys for the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Detroit Red Wing. For the Columbus Blue Jackets, it's their first outdoor game, so it's the first time they're getting the outdoor jersey treatment. Of course, the Red Wings now have had a lot of outdoor jersey. Take a look at them. I think they're freaking awesome. And of course, the Stadium Series in terms of branding and jerseys is like the anti-Winter Classic. So of course, in the Winter Classic, they go for an all traditional look, a vintage look. And for the Stadium Series, the team take a more futuristic approach.
Yeah, I
I
like
thought
it.
that was really horrible in the first few years. I feel like the teams were like looking for what to do. They were trying some things, but not too hard. Like we were also in an era where futuristic things were not really fashionable. Then they went all in. I don't know if you remember those LA Kings, like roller hockey type jerseys,
Yeah.
those Colorado Avalanche from a few years back, blue at the top, burgundy at the bottom with a big A. I kind of dig those LA King roller hockey jerseys, but they were way too much. And then I feel like for the past few years, they have nailed it. The teams have nailed the look that they need to look for in those terms of futuristic look. Don't get me wrong. I don't think those jerseys should be full-time jerseys under any circumstances. But like the Washington Capitals jersey from, was it last year, 2 years ago, with the huge eagle on it? It's completely nuts, but nuts in a good way.
Yeah.
And I think that they've nailed it. Both the Columbus Blue Jackets have nailed it. So the Columbus Blue Jacket.
Sorry, I was going to say.
Yeah, go ahead.
I really dig. We're seeing on the screen right now the Blue Jackets one. If you're watching
Yeah.
on YouTube, and the big cannon. And I have to say, if you've been to a Blue Jackets game in Columbus, it will scare you. I've been there once. The cannon hits so hard, it hits you in the feelings every time they score a goal. I was
yeah.
scared, and this represents well the team. And I have to say also, Max, I'll put the Detroit Red Wings one on air in a second. It does give me vibes of. Maybe you're too young to remember that movie, but it was. Let me make sure that it's Youngblood.
Youngblood? Yeah, with Keanu Reeves.
Yeah, and Rob Lowe.
Of course.
It does give me vibe of Youngblood, the Detroit Red Wings jersey.
Well, I'm looking right now, but I'm pretty sure the Youngblood jersey was inspired heavily. Yeah, it's basically a Detroit Red Wings jersey, the white one, with a horse and a big M on him and stuff like this. So it actually makes a lot of sense that it has some Youngblood vibes. I agree with you. So yeah, for our audio listeners, so the Columbus Blue Jacket is navy blue, as Kevin said, with the huge cannon. at the front. The captaincy patch is on the right, and the letter is within the shape of Ohio, which is absolutely a beautiful touch. Big silver stripes on the sleeves at the bottom too. Those stripes have a kind of glossy effect to it. Think LA Kings, think Vegas Golden Knights. The pictures of Zach Werenski that I am seeing here is a little bit underlit, but I think this is a mate navy blue helmet, but I'm not 100% sure. And then that Detroit Red Wings jersey has a more traditional striping pattern to it. The stripes are mostly red, but in a different fashion than their usual one. It's written Detroit baseball style.
I was
to the front.
I was gonna say baseball style. It's really like just in cursive and
I love it. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful, with of course the normal Red Wing logo on the shoulder. The gloves are absolutely beautiful. It's not just the Red Wing gloves. So for those hockey gear fashion nerds like me, so it's a red glove, but the fingers are white. And then there's Hockeytown written on the pant. I think it's beautiful. And what I dig to me, I think where the NHL has nailed the stadium look these past few years, it's oversized logos on the helmet. But what the Red Wing did, they didn't just put the logo and oversized it. They just took the wings and put it on the size, kind of like the Philadelphia Eagles.
It looks nice.
And they put a white stripe, a football stripe at the top. A lot of college teams do this nowadays. A lot of kids dig that look. I dig it too. I think both those jerseys are absolutely amazing. Usually traditional six teams need to be very careful when they go down the futuristic look, but the Detroit Red Wings have nailed it. Of course, I don't want the Detroit Red Wings to change their look anytime soon. It's one of my favorite in the league. But I will say this, Kev. The Columbus Blue Jackets, I think their looks are dated. And don't do those exact Stadium Series jerseys, but take them and make a more, just like a better mix of traditional elements to it and make it the jersey, man. With the cannon and all that, it's beautiful. Yeah. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, I think that cannon should be the inspiration for the new branding of the Blue Jackets one day, and I'm glad they're going away from that B or that blue jacket that was at the beginning of their year of their
the old
and so I'm glad they went.
You know what's funny is that when I was young I didn't understand what that was, and then when I got younger, learned English, it was a play on, because they were called the Blue Jackets, so it was a yellow jacket.
Exactly.
But, anyways, not the smartest move. I prefer this look.
No, I agree, and I think it's a good way to go. And I'm looking forward to those Stadium Series games. I was supposed to work on the Winter Classic. Health problems didn't permit me to do so, but I'm looking forward to doing the Stadium Series later this year.
Yeah, I think if one of those Red Wings helmet go at auction, you know what, I might try and get one. Absolutely gorgeous. Okay, that was the fashion news of the day. Now, let's go all across Canada. We will ask a question, watch a big story for every single Canadian team for the second half of the season. As crazy as this sounds, every Canadian team has a legit shot at the playoffs at the halfway mark of the season. Toronto, Winnipeg, Edmonton, and Calgary would be in if the playoffs started today. Vancouver and Ottawa are a point out of the playoffs. Of course, Ottawa in the east, Vancouver in the west. And Ottawa has a game in hand on Columbus, by the way. And Montreal, after that crazy month of December and start to February, not February, January, we're at the halfway point of January. I think at this one we can also say they're having a crazy January. They're 2 points out of the playoffs. Before looking at every single Canadian team and what story to watch for the second half of the season, what better way to support something you love than by ripping it on yourself? Game Over's apparel line has dropped with 3 unique lines. Whether you feel the nostalgic pull of our retro skater design, want to make a statement with our established design, want to wear your love for goalies proudly, I have that t-shirt, it absolutely rules, with our live and die by the goalie design, go and get yourself a Game Over merch piece. It's designed by Brady Chalos from Game Over Winnipeg. Use the QR code that appears at the start of the episode if you were watching on YouTube and help the community, help the Game Over community grow, or just go to gameover.com. There is a store right there and you can get your merch. All right, let's go across the country. We will go in no particular order. And of course, because we're going in no particular order, we're starting with Toronto. Of course, we have to start with Toronto, even though we're both in Montreal. To me, Kev, it's really simple. I don't know if you saw the images of John Tavares going down at practice on Wednesday in Toronto. Just a freak accident. His skate got entangled with Chris Tanev, just not even a hard battle in the corner, purely accidental. And to me, it's really simple. Will injury derail what has been a steady train this year for Toronto? Because if there is one thing that hasn't been going according to plan for the Leaf this year, it's on the injury standpoint. Of course, Anthony Stolarz has been injured. Austin Matthews has missed a lot of games. Now, John Tavares, they're still number one in the Atlantic Division. Both Toronto and Florida are quite ahead of Tampa, Boston, and the rest. So I'm pretty damn sure that at this point that Toronto and Florida, unless disaster strikes, they're going to finish 1 and 2 in whatever order in the Atlantic. But I do think that the only thing that could prevail Toronto from a first place finish in the Atlantic Division is injuries. And hopefully it's nothing too serious for John Tavares, but I'm going to be honest with you, Kev, it did not look good.
No, it did not look good, and we'll see what the results of the test are later today. But I am one thing surprised by is they're 56 points. They're only 7 points behind the best team in the league in the Capitals. They're top of their division. They're going to be a playoff team, and still it doesn't seem enough. And that's the difference of expectations with the Toronto Maple Leafs this year in Toronto, with Craig Berube saying that the fans who were booing the team just 2 games ago in Toronto are saying, you know what, they're there, they're allowed to boo, and it's okay with me that they do so. That mentality has changed a lot, and not just the expectations, but it's also what the players feel they can do. It doesn't matter if Matthews is missing, if Stolarz is missing, if Tavares is missing now, the expectations are still there. It's not an excuse anymore. And over the last few years, we've seen this happen often. Funny enough, though, if the playoffs were to start today, there's a high likelihood that they would face Tampa Bay in the first round of the playoffs. And we have all seen that movie before. And usually the ending is the Lightning winning in 7 games or less. That will be maybe the litmus test for Toronto, is playing a team that you've struggled against in the playoffs, either Toronto, Tampa Bay, Toronto, Boston. Those could be interesting matchup in the first round.
Yeah, but you know what? That's actually interesting because the Atlantic Division, there's been a big 4 in the Atlantic Division for so many years now that unless you finish not only first in the Atlantic, but first in the whole Eastern Conference and catch the second wildcard team, it's the current playoff format has really been doing a disservice to a lot of teams in the Atlantic Division. And I'm not saying this to excuse the Leafs. I mean, I'm from Montreal after all. But, you know, these teams are in a tough situation to start the playoffs. And I feel like this season, with Boston going down and it being more of a big 3 right now, even though Boston and Tampa are tied in points, Tampa has 4 games in hand on Boston. And the way Boston are playing right now, I'm counting them out of that big 4. It's really a big 3. For Florida or Toronto, it's actually important to finish first. It could actually help them a lot. Especially, you know, like if Boston gets all the way down and suddenly you have a first-time team in the playoff, whether it's Columbus, Ottawa, Montreal, I'm talking, of course, first time with these core of players, you know what, that might actually be a good thing. So they need to keep going. They need to go for that first place in Atlantic, in my opinion.
Yeah, for
Here
sure.
in Montreal, how far will Leonardson go? Like, honestly, to me, this is it, because the playoff push is so unexpected. It will remain like an unrealistic expectation for me until the end. If they get there, cool. If they don't, good experience. You know, like it's just cool to follow. But Lane Hudson is a Calder nominee right now. Unless he gets injured now and never plays again for the rest of the year, I don't see how he's not a Calder nominee. And at this point, I am willing to say something I have not been willing to say so far this year. He has taken over Macklin Celebrini as my personal favorite. What he's been doing at the Montreal back end is absolutely nuts. Running the first power play for a team going at it for a playoff spot. The man could reach 60, 65 points. And you know what? With the actual pace that he has, even 70 isn't out of the question. The pass he served to Kirby Dach in that game against the Utah Hockey Club. So that was the first of 2 Kirby Dach goals. If you haven't seen it, go see it. He gets into the offensive zone, breaks at his spot at the blue line, has 3 players completely mesmerized looking at him. It completely opens the lane for Kirby Dach on the other side, dishes him the apple, and then Logan Cooley going on an absolute clinic of how not to play in the defensive zone. Editorial comment here. That was absolutely... A player does that on my beer league team, I'm mad at him, just saying. But it led to a goal. To me, that was the Lane Hutson experience. Already, 40 few games in his career, mesmerizing and getting the respect like this on the play from opposing players. Absolutely crazy.
Yeah, top points getter in the rookies right now. 4 points ahead of Macklin Celebrini and Matvei Mishkov. And not only that, he's top 5 in defenseman points also this year. He's also in, if you're looking at the amount of points Cal McCarr did in his first 40-something games, and players like him, like Erik Karlsson, he is in the same pace. He is playing to the level of a Cale Makar rookie season. We all seen what happened then. Lane Hutson, and that's not even a hyperbole. Lane Hutson could be a Norris Trophy nominee this year. Calder for sure. But depending on the pace he keeps on getting and how many points and how he's playing this year, he could be top 5 defenseman this year in his rookie year, playing for a team that at the beginning of the year did not have a defensive strong mentality. It's getting better. Defensively, they're getting better. They're also getting more offensive firepower, which helps them defensively also. But for Lane Hutson, the one thing that I'm going to say that I think is fascinating is we all know he's not the biggest right now. He's pretty thin, and he's going to grow into his body over the next few years. But teammates have said that he's almost unhittable. The other team's trying to hit him, but he's so mobile, and has such a great skating ability that he just gets out of the hits. He just doesn't get hit. He doesn't get put out of position, and we've seen so far what he can do.
And let's be real, from a purely defensive perspective, Lane Hutson is Chris Pronger, whatever, Shea Weber, name whoever you want, that is an extremely amazing defenseman. But if you haven't been following Montreal this year, the narrative around how he needs to outscore his defensive woes is greatly exaggerated. To me, this is the biggest surprise. I mean, let's be real. The offensive output, even from the most optimistic perspective, is surprising. But the defensive one is really, really amazing. To me, he already can hold his own in his defensive end. Is he perfect? Absolutely not. Is he better served with a great defensive defenseman on his right? Absolutely. But he's making great plays. Extremely smart. He has a good stick. So that is absolutely impressive on his part. Cue in right here a little comment on him being ranked solo on Corey Bronzman list of a U23 player.
Oh yeah, it does. It doesn't matter anymore. We're seeing on the ice, and that's what counts.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Vancouver. We talked about it on Tuesday, so I'm sorry, Vancouver. We will not spend a lot of time on this because we know what it is. How will Peterson-Miller drama unfold, and how will it impact the rest of the season? Because right now, I must confess, I might have been disrespecting Quinn Hughes a bit right here, because my man Quinn Hughes, I was talking about Connor Hellebuck MVP. Quinn Hughes deserves some... There are many players who deserve some MVP talk love this year. Of course, there can only be one and there can only be 3 nominees. But Quinn Hughes is as much an MVP as you can get from the rear end. The statistics from when he is on the ice versus not on the ice for the Canucks are absolutely crazy to look at. The man is back in the thick of the defenseman scoring race along with Zach Werenski and, of course, Kel McCarr. By the way, we just talked about Lane Hudson leading all rookie for points. Quinn Hughes is the only player to have led rookie for points, not only in the salary cap era, but in the 21st century, because before Quinn Hughes, Brian Leach was the last defenseman to lead rookie in point. That was in 88, 89, if I'm correct. It was the late 80s for sure.
And by the way, a little shout out to when Brian Leach did that. He was minus 40 something during that season, by the way, too. So that was pretty
Good
bad
Lord.
for Brian Leach. Yeah, it was one of the
Good
worst plus minus in the history of the league that year for Brian Leach.
So yeah, how will it unfold and how will it impact the team? Because despite everything that is going on this year, can you imagine the Canucks with no drama this year? They would be number one in the Pacific. They're right there, a point out of a playoff spot with all that drama, with all those injuries, no starting goalie for the first quarter of the year, the two top centermen apparently going full Jake Paul, Mike Tyson on one another.
Yeah,
I don't know.
2 nights ago, it was the first time this season that the Vancouver Canucks have Philip Hronek, Elias Peterson, JT Miller, Quinn Hughes, and Thatcher Demko all together at the same time on the
Absolutely
ice.
nuts.
So that's
Absolutely
like your
nuts.
top 5 players in the entire team. Was the first time this year. The only thing about the Canucks that worries me is it does feel like they are dependent on Quinn Hughes right now. If it's not for Quinn Hughes not only being good on the power play, but literally feeding everybody on 5 versus 5 also.
I agree.
When there's a famous game 2.5 weeks ago when he received a shot on the face and he was out of the period for almost the entire first period. He came back with 3 minutes left. There was no offense whatsoever for the entirety of that period. Quinn Hughes comes back on the ice. A couple seconds later, there's a goal by Vancouver, Quinn Hughes. And then he started to feed other people too on that game. But that tells you that Vancouver are a bit dependent on Quinn Hughes, and to progress and to make the playoffs, they'll need a couple other sources of production.
Edmonton, you know what? Quietly, it's the best team in the league since November in terms of points percentage. And so it's a very simple question, Kev. Just how much of a copy-paste from last season will this year be? Start rough, not as rough, but start rough, and then get back all the way almost to the top, and then a Stanley Cup run. Probably, you know what? If you're in Edmonton right now or just an Edmonton Oilers fan, probably you're like, yeah, let's copy-paste everything except literally the last game of the year.
Exactly, except game
Literally the last one, because they lost in Game 7. Well, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't want to copy-paste the full Stanley. Like, if they had to choose, they would rather not take an 0-3 deficit in the Stanley Cup Finals. But you know what I mean. And they can do it. They can definitely do it. I hope the Edmonton Oilers add some help on the blue line, some defensive stalwart help on the blue line. I do think at least one depth forward could help too. But other than that, they can do it. I'm not the biggest Stuart Skinner fan. I've said it times and times again on this podcast. But what can I say? He was the starting goalie for a team that went all the way to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals. So the way the Oilers are built, of course, they're not going to get Andrei Vasilevsky or Connor Hellebuck between the pipes. No. So...
And even if they do, we'll see a different version of those goalies because they're going to receive a bit more shots per game.
Yeah.
It's not going to be the same, right? A system does come into play, but I just want to come back 1 second to what you mentioned. After a difficult beginning of the season where they were playing below 500 for about 15 games, like a lot below 500, they're not a 4th best team in the league. To me, that's crazy. The turnaround that we've seen, of course, there were great runs, like Draisaitl was 14 games with a point, straight games with points, and he had like 30 points in that span. You have Connor McDavid continuing to be one of the best players in the league and scoring, but especially doing great assists. You've seen Zach Hyman scoring again over the last few weeks. That's good. This team is doing good without Evander Kane. And Evander Kane could become an asset to be traded to get that defenseman or to get some help. There's also rumors that an Adam Henrique could be traded to bring maybe a little bit better top 6, top 9 player that could help in both sides of the ice. They have some assets that they can let go to make this team even better before the trading deadline.
And you know what? You're talking about McJesus suddenly and quietly climbing back up in the Artros race. And suddenly Nathan McKinnon with 70 points in 45 games, who really had a good step ahead, has to look and see that the McDavid in the mirror is closer than he appears. Just before we go down to Winnipeg, looking for a way to make awesome memories with your friends, want to take some promotional pictures for your business, check out Le Saint Hotel in Montreal Southwest. It's an amazing selfie studio located in Montreal's historic Château Saint-Ambroise, adjacent to Inchu Bijou, that boasts 12 unique decors for you to enjoy and make memories. Hop in their iconic heart-shaped ball pit. I can see my man Kev in the heart-shaped ball pit, absolutely. Or transport yourself back in time to Expo 67. Oh, that would be cool. The Saint Motel can also come to you with mobile decor setups available for rent or events, including setup and takedown. Head to lesaintmotel.com for details or to check out their amazing decors that are always being updated.
Yeah,
and then catch your boy in an Expo 67 setup. That would be really cool.
I wouldn't mind going to ball pit. Those are always fun. There's a couple of there's an like 80s 90s era room with like arcades that you can see on the screen right now that I would love to go to, and you can play Mortal Kombat 2 there, by the way. So Pac-Man and Mortal
you know
Kombat
what?
arcade.
Kev, you're a bit older than me. So,
Yes.
you know, one of the big, how can I phrase this? One of the big nostalgia that I have for something that I have known but barely is arcades. Whenever I see, whether it's in a movie or in a series set up in the 80s or early 90s and there's arcades, I'm like, oh gosh.
Yeah.
Like if one day I become a millionaire, I will not tell anybody, but there will be signs, and among the signs there will be arcades in my basement.
Those were the days. Those were the days. And in Montreal, we had
God, I love arcades.
there was a lot of good ones. There was one in Laval that was very, very big in the old Galerie Laval. And there's a comeback for arcades, by the way. There's a couple of arcades opening here and there. Smaller ones. They're not as big as back in the day. Smaller ones. But yeah, I agree with you. When I was a kid, my favorite place in the world was going to Niagara Falls, because there was an entire street, Clifton Hill, which is just arcades. I would be dropped off there.
Beautiful.
My mom would be, I'm picking you up in 3 hours. Here's $40. You can go on the arcades. And back then, $40 was a lot for arcades. So
that was what I was going to say.
Oh.
That's like a $200 in today's money.
Exactly. Also, one of my favorite memories in the world, and I'm not going to talk about it too long, but I used to go to Wildwood in Atlantic City when I was a kid for summer vacation.
Oh, wow.
Wildwood had a boardwalk with tons of arcade that you can win tickets to exchange for some prizes. One of my favorite prizes ever was a Duke Blue Devils basketball that I love. It's college basketball time. And also I remember having a nice t-shirt of the New Jersey Devils, because it's Wildwood in New Jersey, that I got at that arcade also.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, my favorite arcade of all time.
It was one of the best games ever, to be honest.
Oh yeah, really, absolutely. I have a modern version on the PS4 right here. Shredder's Revenge, I think it's called. It's pretty fun. You can play this with pizza on a Friday night. Okay, Winnipeg. Are they just more than Connor Hellebuck? I do think they are. There are similarities, though, between those Winnipeg Jets and the Montreal Canadiens from prime Carey Price era. In just how much of an MVP Connor Hellebuck is. I do think that this Jets, first of all, they have a true, no disrespect to my man David Desharnais, but they do have a true number one centerman in Mark Scheifele. They have an elite sniper in Kyle Connor. Although Montreal had a very good sniper in Max Pacioretty, I think that in today's game, Kyle Connor is just a bit better than Pacioretty was. In defense, though, you might give a slight edge to Montreal back in the days, because they did have Andrei Markov and PK Subban to lead that defensive squad, but Winnipeg's defensive squad is in the shy either on talent, so it is a very good team. But for Winnipeg now, especially the way it went in the playoff last year, again, the Colorado Avalanche, with Connor Hellebuck not playing his best hockey, despite the fact that he did say he was playing his best hockey. Come on, Connor. So they lost in the first round last year. They lost in the first round 2 years ago. They didn't qualify for the playoffs in 2022. Of course, they lost in the second round to the Montreal Canadiens in the Canadian division in 2021. So they have had a good team, the Winnipeg Jets. Remember, they went to the conference final all the way back. It was against the Golden Knights. So the Golden Knights was 2018. The first year of the Golden Knights, not the year they won the Stanley Cup.
1920, when the Golden Knights made it to the conference finals.
But that's when they won the cup, right?
No, they won the cup
Golden Knights?
2 years later. Anyways,
No, but in 2020, it was the weird playoff in the bubble.
yes,
That was the
but
Dallas Stars that went to.
the year before that when it was.
Okay.
Anyways, it doesn't matter. But yeah, the Golden Knights.
The first year, the Golden Misfits, those bunch of golden jerks that were on an expansion franchise that got a free ticket from Gary Bettman. Okay, let's not get there. Anyways, all this to say that they've had a good team for quite some time now. Connor Hellebuck isn't that young anymore, even though he's playing like a young buck, no pun intended. Mark Scheifele either. So they have a window. It's a very, very tough Western Conference final. I want to see Connor Hellebuck carry this team deep this year. But he will need help from his teammates.
Well, also, do you think he's going to need help from his backup? That's my question too. Will he be too not tired, but is he playing too much as a long run? When you get to the later
That's
half
a very
of the
good
season,
question.
in the later half of the season, do you not rotate a bit more, but do you use the backup a bit more? We can't even name the backup. That's how much he's not playing. Who's the backup of the Jets? I gotta look it up because we
It's
never
Eric Comrie.
Exactly. We never see him
Comrie.
play. So should
No, he has 10 games this year.
exactly. Should he play more? Should Winnipeg start to think long term with Connor Hellebuck and not have him? I don't want to say tired or exhausted, but depleted maybe when playoff times come.
Yeah, but it's a good question. Should he play more? Absolutely not. All due respect to Eric Comrie, because it hasn't been that pretty when he's in net. Should they get help? Can they get help? Is there a goalie at a decent price available just to... Because that would be like... Because you're getting him just to help you secure a good spot in the playoffs and rest Connor Hellebuck, because then playoff comes in unless something happens. You know, Connor Hellebuck is in the net every single minute of the playoffs. But you know what I would love? God damn, I would love a Winnipeg versus Edmonton conference final. That would be beautiful. That would be the nightmare of Gary. Edmonton, Winnipeg. Edmonton versus Winnipeg in the playoffs. Oh, please give it to me in the conference final. Now I'm going to speak it into existence. I'm going to speak Winnipeg versus Edmonton in the conference final. That would be absolutely beautiful. I want it. I need it. Please do it. Connor Hellebuck versus Connor McDavid. That's the type of story that I love. Elite goaltending on one side. Of course,
no goaltending
offense on the other.
Exactly.
Oh, please bring it.
Also, the two different ways of a team can play. Defensively sound with Scott Arniel at the head, and offensively creative with Chris Knobloch and how they're doing on that side of defense. It would be a fascinating one too. Manitoba versus Alberta, the neighbors. Well, the Prairies brethren. It will be quite a series. I want it to happen too.
The North versus the North is what I want, and the North remembers. Okay, Calgary. Can the offense provide enough support for that stellar goaltending? Because the Calgary Flames, we've said it earlier, they are, as of right now, at the moment we are recording this podcast, in a playoff spot. Despite all of that, they are 27th in goal for per game. They are at 2.63, and they're not that high in goal against. They're 13th, which is middle of the pack, or a bit higher than middle of the pack. But both Dustin Wolf and Dan Vladar are having stellar season, especially Dustin Wolf, as far as I'm concerned. The kid is absolutely amazing. Any year that doesn't have Macklin Celebrini, Lane Hodgson, and Matvei Mishkov, Dustin Wolf is a Calder favorite for what he's doing in front of the net. But the goalies are great. The goalies are great. Jonathan Huberdeau, without going back to his Florida Panthers heydays, is playing a little bit better right now. Nazem Kadri is having some fun. He had some fun with the reporters too a few games back. So him too.
I was going to say Matt Coronado is also having a decent season, and he's becoming a dependent two-way player for this team. So that's also something that is worth mentioning.
Yeah, some would say finally at 22 years old.
Exactly.
But same thing for Kadri as with Huberdeau. He will never reach again the 87 points he had when he won the Cup with Colorado, but he's on pace for close to 60 points this year. He did have a good season, though, Kadri, last year. He came close at the point per game last year. My respect to Nazem Kadri. He actually had a better season than I remembered last year. But they're the guys they paid. And honestly, that would be a very pleasant surprise for me for the Calgary Flames to make the playoffs. They play a tight game. You just talked about the Winnipeg Jets. The Calgary Flames play a tight defensive game, but they need to score some goals. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then we end back in the national capital, Ottawa. Just how long will Ullmark be gone? And can they hold on until he is back? Because that's what they're doing right now, Kev. They're holding on. He hasn't played since December 22. And it's not a catastrophe for the Sens. They're 4-4-1. They're just at 500. But they're going to need to be better than that to get into the playoff, because unless something happens in the second half, we're not in a year. Like, remember last year? Like, there are years where it feels like nobody wants to get in.
Yeah. Everybody loses. Yeah.
Yeah, right now it's the total opposite. Everybody wants to get in, except the Boston Bruins, apparently.
Yeah, they're going to keep falling, though. The Bruins are going to fall out of a playoff spot for the next 2 weeks.
I agree. That's my hot take, too. The Boston Bruins out of the... You know what? I actually still believe more in the Rangers than the Boston Bruins at this point.
Ouch.
Yep, even if But they have Shesterkin and Panarin. How can I not? This team can go on a roll anytime with Shesty. And you say Swayman, yeah, but Boston were ruined from the start, from the way they were managed in the offseason. So I do think they're crashing. And Columbus has 8 wins in its last 10 games. Montreal has 7. Detroit has 7. Now Pittsburgh are on the way down. They have lost their last 3 games in regulation after going on a good run. But all this to say that Ottawa, if they just play at 500, it will not be enough. It will not get into the season. But if they play at 500 until Ullmark is back, they will stay in the thick of it. And that's what they need to do. That's what they need to do.
I agree. And the only reason I'm going to say Swayman again is because last year Swayman and Ullmark were together, right? So you had that tandem for a long time. This year, it's just after. We just got to 2025. And Jeremy Swayman has already surpassed his loss total in his entire career for a season. It was 13, and he's already at 15 or 16, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a season, career high losses for Jeremy Swayman with the Boston Bruins. They're going to fall, which is going to help the Senators, which is going to help Montreal have a shot at those top 2 wildcard spots. What I do like for Ottawa is that they're doing so without their top gun right now firing on all cylinders.
Yeah.
Tim Stützle. Great, but he's not as great as he was earlier this year or last year.
I agree.
Claude Giroux is doing well. I've worked on a lot of Ottawa games. Claude Giroux is doing what he is expected of. But Ridley Gregg still not offensively contributing to the level that I think he should. A couple players in Ottawa that if they step it up a bit, Batherson, if he goes back to his prowess of last year, those maybe are how Ottawa will get better. It's just players will get back to their normal levels once the injury situation, once that long road trip. They were gone for 9 games during the holiday season for the World Juniors in Ottawa. And then you come back after they came back in Ottawa a few times during that road trip, but they didn't play there. And at home, they don't have the best home record. 11-7-1 Ottawa at home, 11-11-2 on the road. They need to make Canadian Tire Center a bit more hostile and a bit more winnable for them. If they can play for 650, 750 at home more than they are right now, I think they have a shot. But that's a big, I would say the weakness in Ottawa right now is how they play at home.
And a decade later, do we have a new Hamburglar in Levi Merilainen? I just talked about holding on until Linus Ullmark gets back. Well, the kid from Finland, he's 22 years old. Well, giant. Not by today's goalie standards. He's 6'3". He's not that big. In 7 games, he has 5 wins, a .925 save percentage, a 1.99 goal against average. So my man Levi Merilainen, man, I don't know what's in this water in Ottawa every decade. Is there some form of legend? Every 10 years, a random goalie comes in and saves the Sens. That would be absolutely beautiful.
Well, yeah,
I'm rooting for that kind of stories.
Yeah, well, it started a long time ago. Remember Patrick Lanim, who came out of nowhere in Pittsburgh, 17 wins in a row, and then eventually made his way to Ottawa and became a really good goalkeeper, one of the best they had in their franchise. So there's always a goalkeeper that comes out of either the shadows or obscurity or from struggling somewhere else to be spectacular in Ottawa.
Fun fact, I have a Patrick Lowling jersey in the closet.
Yeah.
Right here.
That's awesome.
And you know what's the craziest thing? It's a practice jersey.
Oh, wow. Those are actually, I think those are cooler because they're rarer. You can't find those everywhere.
Man, so what year is it? Like probably '01 or '02. So just before Marc-Andre Fleury is my favorite player all time. Just before he gets drafted, my goalie as a kid, as a 10-year-old, is Patrick Lalime. He comes from Saint-Majoric, which is a very small town, a village outside of Drummondville, Quebec, where I lived back then. His mask, my favorite all time, with Marvin the Martian. I thought it was freaking awesome. And so at a point, I need a practice jersey for goaltending. And so we get in Benoît La Source du Sport in Drummondville, all the way back in 2001 or something. And my dad gets hey, yeah, grab a practice jersey, whatever. I grab the Senator one. And he says, yeah, want to put the number 29, your name? I'm like, nope, you put Lalime 40 on it. So I have a practice jersey of Patrick Lalime still in there. I don't think I could put it over my hockey equipment nowadays because I grew much taller than I was at 10 years old. But hey, you know what? I'm going to get it signed by Patrick Lalime one day. That's my new objective. New career objective. Get it signed. You work with him. I will give it to you and you get it signed.
I can make that happen. Just send it over to me in the next few weeks when I do a game and he's the analyst. I can get that done for you.
You know what? I'm not going to do that because I want to tell him the story.
True.
I want to tell him the story of how I got it.
Come to work with me and I'll make it happen.
Yeah, because he'll probably be like, why the heck do you have a practice jersey of me? That is absolutely weird. You know, it's those old center ice jerseys from back in the day.
Those were cool. Like I dig those with the logo and the round of the center ice. Yeah, those were cool.
Yeah. Anyway, so these are our stories to watch for the rest of 2024, 2025 for the Canadian teams. What is the story you're going to watch for your team until the rest of the season? Let us know in the comments. Just before we let you go, if you want to help us, if you want to help Game Over Network in any way that you can, we have a Patreon. You can head over to it and help an upstart media company employing over 30 young journalists across Canada, journalists and analysts. So if you have a few spare bucks, well, go ahead on our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/the Game Over Network. There are tiers of membership, and you directly help us with our content. We would be really grateful. If not, if you don't have a few bucks to spare because times are hard, well, just a like on this video edition of the podcast, a review if you're catching us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to Game Over Network. My name is Maxime Vanout alongside Kevin Laramé. Daph couldn't join us today. Of course, I think you figured it out at this point. I just realized I didn't even mention it to start the show. What a horrible host and friend I am out here. Wow. We're gonna have to do some post-production on this. No, I'm just kidding. We don't do that. We're fully 100% honest with you guys. Thank you so much for catching today's episode, and we'll talk to you on the next episode of Hyperdrive Hockey. Bye, everyone.